So how to modify and cut down pallet racking. Oftentimes the bottoms of the pallet racking are dented up and smashed up because of forklifts hitting it or people with pallet jacks or skids or whatever. So I've got this pallet racking and it's 14 foot, but I want to make some 10-foot sections because I'm going to make a outdoor enclosure for my patio furniture. I cut a 10-foot piece over there, so basically I cut 4 feet off the top, off the bottom. I took the bottom off. Okay, and when I did that, basically this was an easy one to modify because there's already that brace over here at the bottom. I cut off the feet, smashed them straight again, reused them. So I'll show the process of cutting that down. There's more complicated ones. When you cut one down and you're in the midst of an angle here, you have to measure up whatever the distance is so that your cross beams, so that your beams won't, when they lock in, they won't be in the way of this in this piece. So basically you just have to cut this shorter. Like I believe in this case it was like 6 inches shorter. So you cut that off and then you just put in another piece and weld it in at the right height. That's pretty simple also, but you just, so I left this piece in here and I just welded it here and here and on the ends. But I'm going to show the process to just shorten something from 14 feet to 10 feet. Also, what else? I cut these down, I made them narrower this way. That's even more complex because what you have to do is mark and obviously allow the overlap for this piece, for these pieces to go in all the way up. Okay, so for instance, if you want this finished piece to be 20 inches, you gotta like make these probably 19 and a half. So from here to there, you'd have to go 19 and a half and cut off all these pieces. Every one of these, whether they're diagonal or whether they're horizontal, you got to cut them off. Okay, and then you take, and obviously if you got a modified height, you got a modified height. And then when you have this piece left here, you're going to have scabs on here that you don't want to use, and you got to get in here with your grinder and cut them out. Okay, and then you just push the side back on after it's got all the scabs cut out, and you re-weld it. So in this scenario, I decided I wanted a 10-foot piece. Okay, so I measured from the top and I measured down 120 inches, and with a square I drew lines on both sides. Okay, now you can see that the bottom of this is all compromised. It's been all smashed in and kinked in, and it's kinked in over here. So when I cut this off, I'm going to have like a beautiful, like brand new piece. Okay, but before I cut this, I'm going to cut off my feet because it's going to be easier to cut now while it's still attached to that big long piece. So I'm going to cut off these couple of scabs or these couple of plates. And another thing that you want to pay attention to, when this is on this side here, I'm going to cut just this edge here and just to this one little spot here. And I'm going to cut this off, like right here, as deep as it'll go. And then I'm going to cut this one off just to that first notch. And I'm going to cut my feet off. So while I've got the angle grinder with the cutoff wheel in my hand, I'm going to cut off as much of that foot as I can, as much of this foot. I'm going to cut this to here, going to cut that to the same spot, going to cut that over. Then I'm going to flip it over, and it's going to be elevated on top of this beam so that when I cut off this, there'll be relief and it'll fall down and it won't be binding on my cutoff wheel. As you can see, I cut off the foot all the way down to here on both sides. I cut the 10 foot to here on both sides, and I cut as much of this as I could. Now I'm going to flip over 180 degrees and cut the other side. So now it's all cut off. Next step is to clean up the feet, grind off anything that might be too high, smash it down with a sledge so it's nice and flat and straight again. clean up my new legs over here a little bit and weld the feet back on. I cleaned up these feet good enough, straightened them up best I could to my satisfaction. Just used a little flop disc or flap disc. Prepared the ends over here just a little bit. Took off some paint. Got a grounding spot there. So next thing I'm going to do is just weld on these feet again. Position them however you can, the best way. I just got an old cheap magnet from Harbor Freight, some old busted speaker magnet that I've got. It's only got to be held for a minute. Gonna put the ground on, gonna tack it, and it'll be good. Yeah, one last thing on this piece here, so that I don't have to deal with sharp edges later on the finished product. I'm gonna just get my cutoff wheel and cut off that weld there and cut off a weld over here and take this little piece out before I weld that foot on. There you have it, from a damaged 14-foot upright to a like new 10-foot upright. These are all going to get pressure washed. I'm doing all kinds of stuff with these pallet racking. I made a canopy. It's upside down right now. It's going to go over my elevator here. That's going to get everything's going to get pressure washed with a rotating 0-degree nozzle. Then it's going to get primered and everything's going to get painted. Got all these beams that are going to get painted. Everything's going to be white. It's going to look beautiful. Going to have this rolling storage. That's what this is that I'm making here. It's going to be a rolling storage unit from all my patio furniture. It's all going to fit in this one unit. This patio furniture enclosure storage unit that I want to have. I want to be able to move it so that I can like put it in different places and possibly use it as a sunshade in the summer. But anyhow, so I bought these trailer wheels, okay? And I also have got a rolling workbench in the garage, and I'm going to use the same 4 stands, rolling stands, on the workbench or anything else. So what I'm doing is I'm going to weld a nut. I'm going to drill a hole through the beam bigger than the bolt. Then I'm going to weld a nut in a precise location, 4 precise locations on each end of the beam, on both lower beams. And then I'll be able to just bolt this to the beam, and when it's not in use, there's just 4 welded bolts on there. So I drilled holes bigger than the bolt and put double nuts on. So now this sits in here right where it's going to need to be. I'm going to weld the bottom nut to the beam, and then when I pull out the bolts, the threads will be clean.